in 2019, 228 police officers killed themselves, whereas I think only between 140, 160 died on duty because of the risks of the job. That is unacceptable. And I'd be very hard pressed to believe that it couldn't have been reduced had we received training. So resource wise, there has to be more training, and it cannot just be, hey, you're affected by your job, go seek help when you need it. Police officers aren't going to be open to that. We're a hard bunch. I mean, it's like, no, I'm good. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I'm fine. No, but when you talk about how the brain works and how it's almost like plastic, there's a term, neuroplasticity. You can mold the mind, and the brain is molded as to what it's exposed to.
Yes.
So when you're exposed to nothing but negativity, danger, upsetting stuff, trauma, I mean, and don't cope with it, it's a recipe for disaster.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Naked Gospel. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today we are joined by Officer Scott Medlin. Scott's just going to share his journey with us today through pornography, through fidelity with his wife. He's also going to let us peer into kind of police culture. I know absolutely nothing about that culture, so I'm really just excited to learn, but he's going to help us to see into how like porn culture and hookup culture are active within that demographic, because none of that stuff discriminates. And I'm really just here to ask questions and learn, because again, I know nothing when it comes to this area of life. And I'm really just excited, feel really honored that Scott would join us. Also, year end, if any of you guys appreciate this podcast, there's a dude with money who's promised to match everything you give. So if you want to take place in magic, there's a link down below for donating and investing. And if you give $5, it magically becomes $10. He believes in what we do, and he's a supporter of what we do. We appreciate all your views. If you're not able to give, totally okay. We just like being with you guys. If you are able to give anything at all, it helps us a ton. So that's down below. But now let's stop talking about money and let's hang out with Officer Scott Medlin. Scott, thank you so much for being on with us today. I am really looking forward to this conversation because well, I've been doing this for like years, and I've never actually been able to peer into what it's like with this issue, just like sexual ethics when it comes to fidelity, faithfulness, pornography, those sorts of things in the police force, for first responders, those sorts of things. It's easy to kind of categorize people who do that as kind of impervious to these issues. It's easy to kind of just hate on them or just react to them or just kind of see them as a part of the system as opposed to humanize them and actually look at their struggles. So thank you so much just for being on with us today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And you hit the nail on the head when you said humanize, because all first responders are human, whether they'd like to believe it or not. We're human, and all of us.
Yeah. Scott, just for context, like how long, I want to get into your story, but how long have you been an officer? Where are you located? Just a quick bio of what your life looks like right now.
Okay. Well, I live in North Carolina, and I police in North Carolina. I'm at a small university, which unfortunately is kind of boring right now because it's all virtual learning. So there's no students on campus, but I just started there. Prior to that, I worked at a city agency for 12 years, worked regular patrol, canine officer for 4 years. And then my last 3 years there, I was in the school resource officer. So I worked at two busy schools, one of them being an alternative school for the county. So that was a pretty interesting experience. So that's what my law enforcement career has looked like.
No, that's super helpful. I assume it's okay to call you Scott.
Oh yeah, perfectly fine.
Okay. Right on, man. Well, I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness just to share your story with us. Before we get into some of the stats and look at the big picture issue, would you mind just taking a few minutes just to share your personal story with us and what fidelity and faithfulness, pornography, those sorts of things, how that's impacted you, and what's that's looked like in your career?
I was a new officer. I mean, less than 2 years on the job. I had been exposed to pornography before when I was in the Marines. That was honestly the first time I was exposed to it kind of consistently, especially on the deployments. I mean, just a bunch of guys out deployed, and it was all over. Not necessarily all over, but it was frequent enough where I knew what was going on. And anyway, so I had been exposed to it, but I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. Questioned it when I was in college. I'm still a member of the church, though, after meeting with some phenomenal priests. And here I am thinking, I'm a Catholic Christian. I'm not ever gonna be addicted to pornography. I mean, how could that happen to me? And all of a sudden, I'm less than 2 years into policing, and it happens. And I got down on myself so bad. I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And I just kept beating myself up. Long story short, 6 months into it, I caved. I was like, I need to get help. So the same doctor who helped me with my initial treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder from my deployments to Iraq, he helped me get over my pornography addiction. It's called neurolinguistic programming, where he basically was able to, through language and my brain associating the need for pornography, I was able to get treated for it and recovered from it. And I have not looked back since. And I'm grateful for that. Praise God, because I've been married for 10 years. I do not need that in my marriage.
No, that is super helpful. It's actually quite unique because most people that I interact with, myself included, like I get exposed to it when we're young, you know, and then that ends up being the issue. So it's quite interesting to hear that it was actually in the force where you were exposed to this and where it became a real issue.
It was the video content behind it I was exposed to when I was deployed in 03 and 05 for Operation Iraqi Freedom. That's where I was exposed to like video content. Now, my dad actually owned rental houses that he would take my brothers and I to work. We were his free workforce.
Sure.
And when tenants would move out, sometimes we'd come across magazines and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, we were affected by it. I'd be like, oh gosh, Dad, get in here. This stuff's gross. You know? So there was an imprint there. And then the videos in Iraq. But I don't, if someone were to say, why did you get addicted? I really don't know, but it happened. And this is honestly the first time I've spoken public about it. One of the first times I've spoken public about it, but doing no good to anyone else if I just keep quiet about it whenever someone else is battling it. They need to know they can get treated for it. There is life outside of it.
Yeah. And the contrast, because a lot of people in it are like, well, nothing would really change, you know. So like, why stop? It's not a big issue, and we delude ourselves with that, and then we just stay trapped in it. So this is actually quite helpful. So you were a Marine, you were overseas. How long or how many times?
I went 2003 for the invasion of Iraq. I was there for 6 months, and then in 2005 I went back for about 6 months. And I was in the western part of Iraq. My first deployment, I was mainly in Kuwait, and then the second deployment, I was in the western part of Iraq, which was a pretty bad area of Iraq. So I saw a lot. I didn't do the kicking in the doors and getting in small fire gun battles. The most I did was convoys to different bases for resupply missions. I was the radio operator on convoys and recovery missions whenever vehicles would get blown up, and we had to go recover the vehicles. I was the radio operator. But on those roads, the enemy didn't want to face us head on because they knew it'd just be a bad news for them. So that IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, those were our biggest threat, as well as mortar fire from neighboring towns that we were driving around or near. They'd shoot mortars down on us, and it was stressful. Yeah.
Well, hence the need for some counseling when you got back.
Right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and that's helpful. Okay. So you were there twice, and then you came back, and you've been on the police force since then?
Let's see. I got home in 05, graduated college in 07, and then joined the force. Got out of the Marines as well. So 07 is when I became a police officer.
Wow. Yeah. What'd you go to school for?
Something I haven't used since college, political science.
Nice. Very nice.
Just like, okay.
Yeah. No, it's helpful. It creates a lot of context. Okay. So you were overseas in the military, got exposed to like video pornography. It didn't really grip you necessarily then.
No, not at all.
Yeah. But you saw it gripping the people around you. Was it like pretty ubiquitous? Like, was it widespread, or was it like an isolated incident or here and there?
Here and there. I'm not going to say that not going to say that we had a ton of Marines addicted to pornography.
Sure.
No, not at all. But it was enough where that you would walk. Like my first deployment, I was in. Our home was 80-man tents. Like that was our home. So here I am in an 80-man tent, and I would walk down the tent, and you would see a person watching you here, person watching it there. I mean, that kind of thing.
That makes sense. No, that's actually helpful imagery. Okay, so exposed to it there, didn't grip you, but then when you joined the police force, all of a sudden it did. Do you know what was different between those situations for you?
The only thing I can guess, I worked at an agency for a year and then left that agency for the wrong reasons. I just thought the grass would be greener on the other side. I listened to some negative officers who were just disgruntled. So I left and I went to another agency. I should have never done that. And I felt kind of lost. And I was just like, what am I doing here? And I applied to get back at the other agency. And I was very anxious about going back to the other agency. And that's when it started. So my only guess is I was vulnerable because I was stressed and I felt alone. I didn't feel like I had a purpose there in that city where I was working. That might have been it.
Now, this is actually quite helpful because a lot of people, you had this initial response of like, holy shoot, like the thing that I said would never happen has happened to me and I don't know how to get out. And you had an immediate reaction, all of a sudden went and saw counseling for it just because like, no, I need to take this seriously. It's a curious thing because it like we use like pornography or even like hooking up to hide in a lot of ways, which is really kind of sick because it's like when we're physically most exposed and we use that to hide, you know, super jacked up. But you intentionally like saw this and you went after it, which is really quite commendable. That's very unique.
Well, I appreciate it. When I got home from Iraq, I didn't realize I was battling post-traumatic stress disorder. There was an incident where I was almost killed. I mean, it was an act of God that I survived. And even I was in the back of a convoy. The guys at the front of the convoy, I have a Marine to this day. He swears to it. He's like, I don't know how you survived that attack that happened on you. It was a close mortar fire. Wow. That incident, along with some other incidents, messed me up mentally. Where I was angry, I was judgmental, I was messed up. Yeah. My family relationship with my parents, my brothers, it was just falling apart. So, I got help for that. Well, since I got help for that, it was that much easier to get help when I started battling the addiction. And I knew I had the good doctor who could help me, but I realized it was an addiction one night after I had watched some videos, and all of a sudden it's like I couldn't fall asleep because I had like that temptation was there to watch it. And then it was every day. I mean, it was crazy. It was like every day. And I was like, I can't keep living my life like this. So get treatment. I always tell people you're not weak if you get treatment. You are not weak. You are aware of what's going on and you're doing what is right for yourself. How can that be considered weakness?
No. Yes. And amen. I'm convinced that Jesus works most in partnership with us when we live in vulnerability. It just seems like Jesus likes to use weakness. I mean, that is the culmination of his cross. So like just vulnerability, like living in the light. And I don't know if we can pull ourselves out of darkness without, actually being transparent.
I don't know which apostle said it. I think it was Paul. For when I am weak, I am strong. Yeah, amen. I mean, it is going to be when you're weak, when you're vulnerable. That you're right. Amen. Jesus will come in and you can be strong.
Yeah, that's there in Second Corinthians, and I'm actually reading that right now. My dad challenged me to read it again because one of the major themes in the book is leadership as weakness. It's like literally just leading with a limp and like being the one who's first exposed really is the one who's leading, so that's beautiful. I love all of that. Okay. So I'm really digging this timeline. So, joined the police force and then you were exposed to this. How did that happen? Like, are these like other officers? You saw them doing it and curiosity or like a personal thing?
No, I'm sorry if I made for the I'm sorry that I've made the mistake of letting you believe that on the force I wasn't exposed to it.
Okay.
I mean, we were at work. If you're doing that at work, that's big trouble.
Yeah.
But what I did encounter was officers talking about it, or officers, just kind of talking about it. None were parked in a parking lot watching it and making that known. If they were, that ain't good.
Yeah.
It was mainly in the Marines, but it was during that time where I was less than 2 years on the job that's when it started for me.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. Okay. Scott, how, so you've got like your story. How have you seen this impact your coworkers? Like, do you take this as like an isolated situation for yourself, or obviously, I mean, you just said that other people talk about it, and there are like evidence pieces when it comes to like cheating and divorce, infidelity, those sorts of things, which are wrecking our culture. Not just a specific demographic, but all of us. How have you seen that play out amongst your brothers and sisters there at the force?
This is what really drove me to be on this podcast, and I thank you for the opportunity. It's one of those where you're right. Affairs, divorce are just, especially divorce nowadays, it just seems to be, even when people get married, there's that option. It's just, there's that, they view it as like an easy option, which is heartbreaking to me. But I've had officers come up to me and say, I'm not getting along with my wife, and I won't probe it to the point of uncomfortability, but the ones I have talked to will say, well, unfortunately, I've been battling pornography. And I said, hey, been there, done that. Let's dive into how you can get better. So I've had some come up to me, but I've also had some say, there was one in particular. He was so wrapped up in the job and he wasn't coping well with the stress of the job that unfortunately he had an affair on his wife. Now, praise God, they are still together to this day. They worked through it and they are doing very well. But he said that he would have friends who would send him stuff, and he would, whenever he was done with work, he would go follow up with it and watch it. So, so that was another thing. I was like, man, this stuff's rampant because it's just so easy to get on the internet.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's helpful. I recall, when I was growing up, there's almost this assumption that everyone kind of did watch pornography, like because people would throw out statements as though they were throwaway statements, like as if it was just a simple assumption when it came to pornography. And I even recall like my secular friends for Lent, like they're in no way religious. They just liked the sound of Lent and the idea of giving something up for 40 days, and they'd all give up like pornography, or at least they'd try to, which I always found like very interesting, that they were practicing something very religious for something that is really quite harmful, all the while denying the harm of it and just doing it as kind of like personal social experiment. So yeah, I get the ubiquity of it. There's an assumption. I'm enjoying peering into this a bit. So do you? I don't actually know of any stats that exist. I know you poked around for them. What did you find? What comes to mind as you've been able to search this stuff out? Because I know you've written a few books and you've looked into these issues.
Right. I have written 2 books. When I really researched, when I found more police officers were killing themselves than those who were actually being killed in the line of duty. But when it comes to pornography, I really couldn't find any statistics, any diehard, hey, this amount of police officers are addicted to pornography. That I just couldn't find. I'm sure it's out there, but I couldn't find. But based on research that I have done for my books, I mean, you're looking at officers battling substance abuse, depression, PTSD, and we're talking about hyperarousal, asocial tendencies, antisocial tendencies at times, anger, hopelessness, feeling like you're a burden, and if we're not careful, then our minds can crave quick releases. And there's drinking, there's pain pills, and because of its abundance on the internet, pornography. So because of my personal experience of having being addicted to it at one time, the officers that I've seen who have confided in me in their addiction with it, what I saw on deployment, I know that's not law enforcement, but I know that it's out there. And considering the depression, the PTSD, and anxiety, like I said, that a lot of police officers face. It's obvious because more are dying by suicide each year. Then there's no way that porn's not in the mix of it.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. And as we noted earlier, there are like evidence pieces when it comes to divorce, or I don't know. Is there like kind of a locker room talk in the police force when it's like talking about girls or hooking up or anything like that?
Unfortunately, I've heard plenty of conversations about, I've heard married men talk the way I wouldn't want them to talk.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm not innocent about this.
Totally.
I mean, we're all sinners. I've bragged about how good a girl looks, and I'm married. I mean, it happens. But I've heard talk that it's like, wow, they've kind of really taken that next step towards an emotional affair, or sometimes an actual affair.
Okay, this is actually quite helpful because it's good to hear your passion in this direction. So looking at the problem, Scott, you've probably spent a lot of time like wishing or longing for things to be different. What do you wish existed for law enforcement officers? And I do want to say this with the utmost respect. I want to have this conversation with the utmost respect because I'm not trying in any way to slander police officers, and neither are you. You're a cop.
Right.
They protect us in massive ways, and they're taking so much heat, like just the last few months, like so much heat. And we color all the police force character with like certain events. And I'm not trying to do that. I just want to humanize them a bit. And so knowing that you have helped us to see that, like, no, they are humans and they do struggle just like all of us. And the suicide rate is astronomical among police.
Yeah.
Like you guys see the worst of society, and it's a very thankless job. It's like you don't get to see resolutions. You don't get called, to celebrate the outcome of something. You just get called when catastrophe hits, when there's domestic abuse and just awful things. So like, what do you wish existed as far as, I don't know if it's a culture or resources amongst the police force that you think would just be beautiful and go a long way in helping?
Culture wise, if an officer watches nothing but the news, they're mentally going to be hurting. I mean, the news is obviously going to show that 1% of police officers who do bad. And I am not going to take up for police officers that took advantage of their power they had, or used use of force negligently, carelessly, and downright, like in George Floyd incident, just dehumanized the man.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever support that. But it is up to us good ones to work that much harder to be a good light to the community and to protect them when they call 911, and to go after the bad guys when they need to be caught and be put in jail because they're a harm to society. Culturally, if an officer watches the news, they're just going to get that negative news, and they're going to feel like they're just on their own and hated. Whereas if they turn the news off, actually go out in the community, walk down your downtown street, I'll be very surprised if there's not one person that says thank you for what you're doing, or at least says good morning, have a good day. You can see that there's not all criticism out there. Resource wise, I did not, and this is a crying shame, I did not receive any kind of training about motivation, mental health, any of that until just last year. And it was a 45-minute class. And it was only done because in 2019, 228 police officers killed themselves, whereas I think only between 140 and 160 died on duty because of the risks of the job. That is unacceptable. And I'd be very hard pressed to believe that it couldn't have been reduced had we received training. So resource wise, there has to be more training, and it cannot just be, hey, you're affected by your job, go seek help when you need it. Police officers aren't going to be open to that. We're a hard bunch. I mean, it's like, no, I'm good. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I'm fine. No, but when you talk about how the brain works and how it's almost like plastic. There's a term, neuroplasticity. You can mold the mind, and the brain is molded as to what it's exposed to.
Yes.
So when you're exposed to nothing but negativity, danger, upsetting stuff, trauma, and don't cope with it, it's a recipe for disaster.
No, that is super helpful. I do want to, I don't actually know how many cops would be listening to a conversation like this. But I do want to be sensitive in that direction. You just like threw out a piece of advice that I think is probably quite helpful, where it's like, like the news, we only know how to report bad news, and
Yes.
when your job is already looking at the bad news, like you don't need that at home. When it comes to like other like practices or ways to just be well, like ways to actually enjoy life and to see the beauty of it. What else would you recommend that out there just as options when it comes, whether it's a lifestyle or a practice or a disposition, whatever it might be? I'd be interested in hearing.
I would tell anybody, I don't care what you do. If you're an American, stay away from constant just mainstream, like check it in the morning for a little bit, check it in the evening just to make sure we haven't been attacked by some foreign force. And then you don't need to watch it. I mean, if you ever just step back and look at what did you get from reading those headlines, you probably got nothing good. You probably haven't felt more empowered in life to enjoy it and become a better person. None of that. So I would tell anyone to stay away from the news. But I actually wrote a book, 101 Health Tips for Police.
Look at you go.
There we go.
That's awesome.
It's about how to be more physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually fit for duty. Even if someone's not in law enforcement, I'd still recommend you get it. You're just going to have to be a little bit confused with some law enforcement jargon, but there's literally 101 tips on how to be healthy. My biggest things that I would recommend are being aware of what you expose your mind to, and the news is one. And this is one that I get made fun of a lot, but it's okay because I don't care what people think about me. I know who I am. Yoga. I tell police officers all the time, look, we're so stressed in the weight of the duty belt and the vest, day in and day out for year after year. It takes a toll on our body. So you can keep being miserable in uniform because when you're not physically well, it really takes a toll on your mental being. When you're not mentally well, it takes a toll on your physical being. The body's all one. So I tell officers, do some yoga. And I used to be one of those police. I'm not doing that boring crap. Forget that. I recommend in the book an actual yoga coach who makes it exciting, not boring. Sean B with SeanBeingFitness.com. But I tell people that, and then I tell officers, exercise. Just that's a good stress reliever, scientifically proven to be a good stress reliever, and that would be good for anybody. And here's the good thing about it: you don't have to work out for an hour at a gym. You don't have to do that. All you got to do is just buy a push-up rotator handles. I know I'm not describing them well, but like literally with the power of YouTube, you can do a home workout in 20 minutes and be perfectly fine. So I could go on and on with all the different things that people can do, but just be careful as to what you expose your mind to. And also, and if I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but language. I didn't ever understand the power of language. And what I mean by that is not necessarily being able to speak more than one language, but I'm talking about police officers will walk into a shift, like a 12-hour shift, which is what a lot of them work. And we say, like, when it's 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and we come in at the beginning of the shift, and I've done this too. Oh man, it's only 7. I got 12 more hours of this crap. You're setting yourself up for a bad shift because you're implanting negative energy and negative thoughts into your brain. And language like, man, I'm only 5 years into this. I got another 25 before retirement. That kind of thing. I mean, I could go on and on with the negative phrases. So what I encourage officers to do is if you hear that negative, if you get that urge to say that negative phrase, don't say it, because if you say it, then you're empowering it. And the list goes on. So that's why I wrote a book. There was just too much on my mind to tell people so they can read it at their own pace now.
No, all of that is quite helpful there. I've been in James chapter 3, James chapter 3 with the power of the tongue. You know, like it's a deadly poison. It's a world of unrighteousness. It's a spark. It's a spark that creates a forest fire. And like all of that is like the poisoning effect is your body and the things around you, like the way you perceive the world. So even like that proverb of the power of life and death is in the tongue. You know, it's not just like I used to read that and think like, oh, I could build people up or tear them down. But like I can also cast for myself the way that I see life and I see the day and people around me by how I communicate about them. You know, because it's not just like thoughts and then words. Like sometimes like we speak and we haven't been very thoughtful about what we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can crush us. And I wish that there was training for police officers to make them aware of this kind of stuff. Like, we can be a very complaining bunch only because we're exposed to so much negativity. And if you don't cope with it, then what do you expect to get? You are what you are exposed to. You are what you are around. If you don't cope with it, if you're around a bunch of negativity, you're going to be negative. And yes, I wish there was training about the power of language that you can use, especially for supervisors and higher ranking officers. Use good language because it can trickle down and affect the other officers. But yeah, language is absolutely crucial.
Scott, we've looked at some counsel and some yearning that you have for those in the police force. For those who aren't, for the rest of us, how do you maybe wish, or what counsel would you have for us when it comes to approaching and seeing rightly those who are willing to lay down their lives, those who have taken vows to protect and serve? When it comes to like us just seeing officers and approaching them rightly, speak to us for a minute.
I love it when someone says, thank you for your service. But at the same time, I really, really love it when someone says, hey, I know you have a lot going on. I know you're in a stressful job. I see you out here. I see what you're doing. I'm grateful. When people get really specific, that's what I really, really love.
That's not too invasive.
No, I don't think it is.
That's cool.
Now, if a police officer's having a bad day, then
Sure.
just say the same thing you would to anyone else.
Yeah.
I hope you have a good day.
Yeah.
Just any kind of specific supportive thing, or, hey, be safe on this shift. I'll be praying for you. Something like that. I am not dismissing when someone says, hey, thank you for your service. I mean, this is Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. I'm not dismissing that.
Yeah.
But specificity can really go a long way. And also, it is really tough for people who are not in law enforcement to not understand officers are not just out there writing tickets on hassle-free traffic stops. Officers are not just out there to look good in uniform. And the ones that are, I say go ahead and just quit. But the ones that are out there upholding that oath that they took to protect and serve and uphold the laws of the land with good discretion, it's very hard for people not to see that we see people when they've killed themselves. We have to see their bodies. We see children who are victims of sexual crimes that are unspeakable. We see people try to attack us. I've been attacked before. Not fun. And because of the exposure to that kind of trauma, it's really hard to not feel alone. Like you're on your own through this. So when the public actually does say, we know you go through a lot, can't thank you enough, or hey, I sleep better knowing you're out there at night, something like that, it can help. But to the general public, I do say, us good police officers, yeah, it's tough right now, and we're going to do what we really can to stick with it, because we know that there's 911. People have to call 911 to get police. And me and so many other coaches and authors and other police officers and therapists are really ramping up the game to help police so that they can show up that much better for you, because mental health and physical health affect job performance. So I know I've covered a lot, but one other thing is I just want to reiterate a point that the job can be so demanding, and I really want people to understand that we really do see things that when I tell people some stuff I've seen, they say, wow, I had no idea that existed in my city or something like that. And it's like, yeah, it does. So this is why it's affecting us. And we're human. We are human. We're going to make mistakes, and I'm not going to justify the mistakes that have taken lives when they didn't need to be taken. I'm not going to justify that. But if an officer shows up at your house and they're not exactly peachy, for lack of a better term, they might have just come from a call where they had to see a dead baby, and it takes a toll on you. Yeah. So it's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Sorry, I'm emotionally processing that. I think.
Well, I said a lot, and I'm sorry for going on a big rant.
No, that's why you're here. You're here to help us, and I think you just gave us a really detailed picture, because that picture can color in the way that we look at cops. Because typically we only see them when we're in trouble. It's like we see them when we don't want to see them. Yeah, right. So you're helping us to see them better and see them rightly. And I think one of the most encouraging aspects of this interview is how much personality you have. Like we talked about that earlier, that like cops really are perceived these kind of like stoic, pensive, mean, crass, like just right. Hardened warriors, right? Yeah. And just to see how much personality you have, how much personality God has given you really goes a long way in just humanizing the clothes you wear when you're on duty. So just thank you for being with us. Just having you has been its own lesson, I think.
I really appreciate that. And I along with many other police officers value a sense of humor. And I actually have a YouTube channel, Law Enforcement Motivation channel. Anyone is please go on it. I might be able to give you some motivation, whether you're a cop or not. But there was a video I recently made about, I don't know why certain cops refuse to laugh. And now sometimes the job does change people where they have a sense of humor, but then after being exposed to the stress and demands and trauma of the job, they become different people, and they can become bitter and sour and miserable. They don't laugh. But then there's also those type A police officers that get in there, and I think they're too serious. I mean, I'm not saying laugh when it's not appropriate. I'm not saying that, but I did make a video where Officer Serious shows up on a call, the stereotypical cop. I bust on them. I'm like, you need to relax. We're dealing with people, not statistics. And you treat people the way you want to be treated. And a sense of humor can go a long way in diffusing situations. So,
Amen,
but I mean, I that was a promise I made to myself when I became a police officer, to not lose a sense of humor. And unfortunately, I have been in dark places, and I have yelled at people when I shouldn't have yelled at them. I will own that in a heartbeat. But overall, a sense of humor and a personality and being respectful and empathetic goes a long way. And it's actually the person you need to be in the job, to connect with people.
Scott, we are overlooking a significant aspect of your life, and that's you're married. How have you pursued? So like a lot of people who don't see the things that you see can get jaded with life, right? And we can insulate ourselves, and we insulate ourselves with an intimacy that is less than wholesome. But you do see this stuff. How do you practice like vulnerability and being known with your wife? If you're okay with me asking that, because I know that you have worked really hard to have a good relationship with your wife, and it seems like you and your wife have like communication skills set up that are really quite important. And so I'd love to hear how that's worked for you guys.
It's had its moments. Yeah. I've been practically in 2015, 2016, when I was on the K-9 team, it was not good. I was very wrapped up in this identity of being a K-9 officer. I mean, it was my dream job. I had worked for over 10 years to show that department that I was serious about being a K-9 officer. And I finally got the chance in 2012. And even though the dog I had was difficult to handle, and the stress of the job, was not, I mean, it wasn't like there's a lot of defeats in canine work, especially when you miss something or can't find someone. But I was still loving that job. And that last year I had the dog, he and I were doing very well out there catching people who needed to be caught. But unfortunately, I got so wrapped up in it that I was not present at home. I was not putting any extra effort into being a good husband. And at that point, our first child had been born. I was not putting any extra effort into being with him.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have a day off, like a Wednesday, Thursday off, and I would just go put him in daycare for the 2 full days and just sit on the couch and watch TV and be with the dog. That's not good. So after about 9 months of arguing and just being in bad places, I got to a point where I was sleeping in a different room. And my wife told me one time, we were driving down the road, she said, I don't believe in divorce, but I'm having thoughts of life without you. That hurt. And I realized I made a mistake. And I didn't do a good enough job, and there was no going back. I had to get out of that job and put her first. And there's a saying in policing and first responder work in general, family first. So I put her first. So it wasn't always good, but we both, through the teachings of the church, have learned how to strengthen our marriage through good and bad. But there's going to be good and bad. Marriage is never perfect, just an incline the whole time. It's not. My grandmother, who just passed away, she was married for 56 years. You think I could ask her, hey, you and Granddad, y'all always have good times and no arguments? No, she would say they had plenty of arguments. But every time that we do find that the job is too much for me, or any kind of stress of having a family and being a police officer is too much, then it's always amazing how when we put our eyes to heaven and our hearts open to God, the solution presents itself. And that's truly an amazing thing. So, marriage is a blessed sacrament. I mean, heck, Jesus's first miracle was at the wedding in Cana. I mean, so marriage is important, and it's a godly thing. And I made that decision to put my marriage first because it was the right thing to do, instead of putting it in front of an earthly job. And just keeping that godly perspective on marriage for anybody, police or not, can go a very long way.
I know Catholics use the phrase the ministry of marriage. And I had never come across that in like Protestant stuff. And I just thought it's just a beautiful phrase. Like, how is your ministry of marriage going? What is that looking like right now? And like those kinds of questions, they're very piercing. They're very good. And it shows the priority of it, So
and I'm glad you said that, and I really am. But I mean, it's a godly thing, and we have to keep that in perspective. It's not some societal thing where it was like, hey, we'll have this guy and this girl and they can get married and then we'll call it marriage. No.
Yeah. No, I dig all of that, and thank you for letting me ask. Scott, thank you just so much for being on with us today. I really wanted to. Well, the marriage question was a bit more impromptu, but we are so very thankful for just that you would be on with us. You've been extraordinarily vulnerable and transparent.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you for doing this, man. I think it helps all of us to see better and hopefully love better and pray better. So thank you for sharing yourself with us.
If I may just share a few more things about if someone's battling a pornography addiction.
Please.
Thank you. If you are going through one, or you realize, or you don't think you're addicted, but you realize I'm watching it and I don't see life without it. Les Brown is one of my favorite motivational speakers. And he said, a problem has not come to stay. It has come to pass. When I was battling the addiction, I just thought that I couldn't picture life without it. And I wanted life without it, but I couldn't picture life without it. And I just felt like this is bad. This is so bad. Like, am I ever going to get out of this? And then every time I would relapse, I would just get down on myself so bad. I'd be like, oh my God, I have sinned against you again. What have I done? I'm such a bad person. Where I'm sure God was in heaven going, wait, no. I love you. I'll help get you through this. But don't get down on yourself, and realize it doesn't have to be permanent. And it's not going to be permanent as long as you make the work. And it does take work to get out of it, but you definitely can. And you're not weak. Let me reiterate this. You're not weak for seeking care. A lot more people than what you think are going through it. but it's a bad thing, you know. I mean, it objectifies people, and that's not good, because we're all godly creatures. So, but yeah, for any of those out there dealing with it, you are in my prayers. It will come to pass. Just stick with it, and it will come to pass. And I know I could go on, so I'll stop right there.
No, that's helpful. It reminds me of your statement earlier with the Pauline verse of when we're weak, he's strong. Yep. Like you've shared moments of your life with us today that you probably were feeling extraordinarily weak. And that's the stuff you're here to help us with, because you've crawled out of dark spaces with Jesus. Yes. And Jesus is like, share with other people how to crawl out of those spaces. So thank you for just bringing light into a lot of our lives.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a great opportunity, and praise God. This is great. Yeah.
So Scott, so typically I ask, how can people track with you? You've written some books. So there's that. Like, tell us about that. So people who want to continue to follow up with you, YouTube channel, all that, how can they track with you? And then how would you like prayer?
Yes, I write 2 books, 101 Health Tips for Police. And then my first one was actually Mental Health Fight of the Heroes in Blue, How to Mentally Survive Working as a Police Officer, to which I know for a fact has helped other people who are not police officers with their mental health challenges that they face, because we all face stress. I mean, especially now with this whole coronavirus thing. And I think there was an election last week that has a lot of people stressed out as well. Yeah. So, I mean,
I think
that book can help anybody really. But so I wrote those 2 books. You can get them on Amazon, and hopefully you guys won't mind putting links down.
They'll be in the show notes.
Deal. Yeah. So the links will be there. And then my YouTube channel, Law Enforcement Motivation Channel, I will dive into how police officers can help themselves, but some of these concepts can be used across the spectrum with anyone, really. And I do try to be funny in some of them. I'm not a comedian, but I'm trying to entertain people, because I know they like to go on YouTube for how to and to entertain. So I'm trying to maximize those 2 things. But my email address, lawenforcementmotivation@gmail.com, it is on that YouTube channel. And so those are 3 things. And so far as prayer, just please pray for the safety of those troops still deployed overseas. There's not many, but there's a lot. There's not many, but there's a lot that need prayer. And then when it comes to policing, this is a very challenging time in our country to be a police officer, because there could be, like, I'm in North Carolina, but there could be an officer who really screws up in California and it comes right back on me. And that's tough. And there's Portland, Seattle, where these constant riots are happening, and the police are just thrown into this stuff time after time after time. And these agencies are having officers leave by at least 50 or 100 or more. Pray that they'll be able to find work somewhere else. If they did think it was best to leave where they were working, pray that they will be able to continue the good work that they wanted to do in the first place. Pray that they'll be able to find it somewhere else. Because when people call 911, they want good police to show up. So pray that officers will be able to get through this challenging time, so that no citizen will call 911 and have to wait too long while something happens to them.
I would have concluded by saying thank you for your service, but I dare not say that now.
No, I'm sure some people are disagreeing with me.
Yeah. How about this? Scott, thank you for going into dark places for us, and thank you for protecting us when we need it. You are a gift, and thank you for giving us like your day off. Like you like massive shifts, and you give us your day off. So thank you.
Well, I'm actually going to go to sleep now, take a nap, and work tonight. But it was great. I appreciate it. And to anyone listening, I really hope that you got something out of this, some inspiration, some light back to God, because that's the one who we really need to be thankful for, and He can help you through anything you're going through.
Yes and amen. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for tracking with us. I would encourage you to check out Scott's stuff down below. And I think at the end of the day, it's just really helpful to humanize the officers around us, even the military, touching on that, and also to see that when it comes to hookup culture and porn culture, it doesn't discriminate. Like it's touching all of our lives. We need to be present to each other without like actually humanizing one another, and being willing to not just say thank you for your service, but how are you? right? Like how humanizing is that, just to ask somebody, how are you? And just to be present to the response. It can go a long way, and well, we all need that. So thank you for being with us. If you think this episode would help somebody you know, pass it along. We'd appreciate that. Reviews, likes, subscriptions, all the stuff. We're grateful for you guys, and we will catch you next time.